Ladies and gentlemen, take a listen to what Tom Lee just said.
Last week's inflation and jobs data. It's an interesting time to get some perspective from our next guest, Tom Lee. It says be prepared for volatility. Tom is managing partner and head of research at Fundstrat Global Advisors, as well as a CNBC contributor. Would you say towards the last time you were on, you talked about the Trump trade being pretty strong. A lot of things turned back, reversed. DJT reversed. Bitcoin didn't move into the mid-70s, got in the low 70s. I don't know whether the banks and other Trump trades changed, and all the betting markets certainly moderated late last week, came back a little bit. Do you have a change in your opinion on the election now?
Well, it does seem like over the last 4 or 5 days, the election really narrowed when you look at betting markets or the polls. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily trust polls, but I think the quality and the adjustments to the polls have made them more accurate. So I think it is really a toss-up, and it's going to be a very close election. And something our clients are preparing for, because we did a survey last week, 76% don't think we'll have a winner declared election night. And 43% roughly expect it 1 week after. So I think markets are kind of bracing for this period of uncertainty. I think that's why many of the trades have reversed.
We've also heard about some of the trading houses that are not going to be putting any software updates in this week, even some people who want to be here rather than overseas to make sure they're closer on the ground to see what happens too. Yeah,
so I think it's going to be a week where there's going to be a lot of worry. One thing I was thinking about over the weekend, though, is I think the market's fear of uncertainty will peak before, it's very likely it peaks before the election outcome's actually decided.
These signals that we've been looking at, one of the things, I don't know if you read about it, and I think we talked about it maybe during commercial break last week, one of the things that's happened in the polls is the view that there's a lot more women going to vote than before. But that these signals, whether it be Bitcoin or whether it be DJT stock or whether it be the betting markets, may also all be off, if this is true, on the assumption that actually there is a very small percentage of the people in the betting markets who are women, for example. There's a very small percentage of people who are women who actually trade in Bitcoin, not who own Bitcoin, but who trade in Bitcoin. Very small group of women who are trading in DJT stock. What do you think of that?
I think there's some credence to that, just because we know, like when you look at the Iowa polls, it was really the senior women voters that changed a lot. And you're right, these markets can be narrow, and they're very responsive to changes in liquidity. And I think it's a very tight race. I mean, it's going to be very close. I think anyone who thinks that they know who's going to win is really playing with fate, because I think it's a very tight race.
Yeah.
It's interesting from when polls close too, because we've got, there's a couple here, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia are all East Coast. So, if you have some definitive answers, they also, supposedly Virginia and New Hampshire are closer than people in the Harris camp would like, so there could be surprises early on.
Just wonder how long it takes when you have so many more people who have voted early or mail-in votes too. Those take longer to tally. So you might just by default be
like last time.
Yeah. I actually voted last week, and I actually had to wait for a lot of people. Turnout is really what's going to swing this election.
And there's a number of states, obviously, that, by the way, get the early votes and then don't begin to tally them afterwards. And for all sorts of reasons that I would raise some real questions about why they're not tallying them early.
Kind of a bummer when we see it.
Sometimes it's written into state legislation.
No, I understand that, but there's a view among those who are cynical about that they're not counting them until after, so that. And there are,
we've seen it.
Except for what if
there's other countries that know that know by the end of the day.
There's
other countries that know that night, and they've been talking. We're like a little bit envious looking around.
Yeah, you should be able to count.
Here's the problem: if they were counting them early and it was some secret, because you wouldn't want them releasing what the vote count was early. What if it got out? That's the problem with starting the count early.
I have not heard that as the explanation for it,
I'm just
and it's
raising
only
that
red states that have done this. So you can think whatever you want to think about that.
So
what do you think the market-
other than this, other than the election, because the elections, that's sort of what you hear about Wall Street. Elections don't really matter anyway. So if it is gridlock, which we don't know, but more likely, I think the odds are on that too. So you're still bullish.
Yeah, I'm bullish only in the sense that election uncertainty has caused people to de-risk and cash to sit on the sidelines, but the fundamentals have been good. Earnings season's been very good. The Fed is dovish, and I don't think it's going to matter who ends up in the White House. Even if it's split Congress or a sweep, I think markets do pretty well either way. So it sets up for a really good rally into year end. But when it starts in November is just what we don't know.
No. So when you look at we were talking about what Buffett's thinking with Apple or what he's thinking with bank. I mean, that you take Apple and a leading financial, and that covers a pretty big range of the markets. And Andrew thinks he's building an arc. Could you really? That wouldn't work. There's too many species to bring on there with him.
I'm just saying he's building a cash arc.
Cash arc.
An arc out of cash or something. Or is that what he's doing? He may be doing something else. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I know part of it is he's anticipating capital gains taxes could change, so he's taking those gains now. And he's not necessarily having a big cost of money because he's earning 5%. But next year, the cost of money is going to drop, so he'll have some pressure to deploy it.
Tom Lee says that he is bullish after the election. And to Tom Lee's credit, those points that he mentioned, earnings season being strong so far, even though the bar was set low. Yes, earnings season is pretty good. The economy is not great, but it's not terrible. The Fed is looking at cutting rates 2 more times this year and multiple times next year. There's a very strong bull case to be bullish after the election. The big question is, do we have a contested election or do we not? And this is really the last video before, well, I guess there'll be another video coming out at 4 p.m. Tomorrow before the election, but we're getting very close to our major event, and there's going to be a lot of jitteriness in markets, if that's even a word, heading into tomorrow, throughout the day tomorrow. And the longer it takes to find out who the president is going to be, the more nervous people will get. Like, we haven't seen anything yet if we have a contested election, if we don't know the election results. And this is not really because an extra day or two does anything to the economy or, has a structural impact on markets. But what it does is tactically investors, they don't put money to work when there's a lot of uncertainty. So you could see just liquidity freeze up. And when liquidity freezes up, then stocks tend to fall. That's kind of what you've seen in August, right? We had basically a flash crash. At one point, August 5th, the NASDAQ was down 7%. A lot of that had to do with liquidity drying up, just freezing up because of the Japanese carry trade. But obviously, different scenarios we're talking about here. Same point being, if liquidity freezes up via a contested election, we have a major problem. You'll notice from what Tom Lee said, he does sound like he's expecting downside at this point in the near term for markets, especially if we do have delayed results for who the president is going to be. Now, from a technical perspective, the S&P is sitting right at about that 50-day moving average. In the past, you don't tend to stop selling off at the 50-day moving average. You tend to sell off further than that. You tend to sell off closer to that 100-day moving average. And we're just sitting at that 50-day moving average now. So there's definitely some room to see further weakness here. And again, if we don't know who the president is, that's a pretty good reason to fall to that 100-day, or in a more, worst case scenario, fall to that 200-day moving average, which would be about a 10% correction from top to bottom. I also agree with Tom Lee's point that you could see the peak of volatility before the election results are out, right? I think you're not going to see more uncertainty after the election results unless there's some kind of sweep or something along those lines. And again, that looks unlikely. So really, no matter who wins the presidency, markets, there's good odds that markets are going to like that. either way, whoever it is. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts about our markets heading into tomorrow, after tomorrow, what you think is going to happen, because honestly, your opinion is just as good as the polls, or just as good as, the Trump trade itself. Like, nobody knows what's going to happen. So your opinions are very valuable. I would love to hear them down below in the comment section. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.